Hi everyone, I'm back to read the next historical American Girl doll book, and we are in the Marie Grace and Cecile series from 1853. And today I'm going to read Troubles for Cecile. This is book 4 of the 6-book series, and I'll go ahead and read the back. I have Cecile here, and I'll go ahead and read the back of the book so we can see what this one is about. Cecile's summer is off to a glowing start. She loves spending time with her older brother Armand, who is finally home from France. And she and her friend Marie Grace enjoy helping at a nearby orphanage, playing with the children. But a shadow falls over the bright summer when Cecile hears that a terrible sickness, yellow fever, is spreading in New Orleans. When yellow fever strikes in her own home, Cecile is more afraid than she has ever been before. Can she find the strength to help when her family needs her most? Okay, and that is what this one is about. So let's start with chapter 1 and we'll get started. Okay, just to remember, these are our characters in the story. We have Papa, Cecile's father, a warm, gentle man and a successful sculptor. Cecile, a confident, curious girl who loves the limelight. Maman, Cecile's mother, who is firm but kind and is a good businesswoman. There's Armand, Cecile's older brother, who has been studying in Paris, France. Grandpère, Cecile's loving grandfather, a retired sailor with many tales to tell. Tante Octavia and Renée is Maman's widowed sister and her son, who live with Cecile's family. There's Marie Grace, Cecile's new friend, who has just moved back to New Orleans after several years away. And we have Mademoiselle Oceane, a young opera singer who gives voice lessons. Matilda, the Ray's housekeeper and cook. And Ellen, the Ray's housemaid. Okay, and those are our characters, and we'll get started. Chapter 1 is called Whispers. July 1853. A fly landed on Cecile's nose. It tickled. She tried very hard to ignore it, but she couldn't. She raised her hand to scratch. Cece, I can't paint your portrait if you don't sit still, her brother Armand warned good-naturedly. Cecile was wearing her favorite summer dress, pale cotton with daisies embroidered all over it. Bending gently over her head were the sweet, butterfly-shaped flowers of a ginger lily. She was doing her very best to be a good model as she sat on a stiff chair in the courtyard of her home on Dumaine Street, but she was dying to see her brother's work. Please, Armand, can't I see what I look like? She begged. Armand squinted at the large canvas on the easel in front of him and then winked at his sister. Ah, oi, you can take just a quick peek, he agreed, and Cecile eagerly hopped off the chair. Promise you won't tell Maman anything about the painting, though. I want to surprise her. Cecile grinned. She was very good at keeping secrets, and Armand knew it. He had even shared his true dream with Cecile. Although he was now working at his father's stone-cutting business, he wanted to become a painter, not a stonemason, as Papa hoped. This was a truly important secret because Armand hadn't yet figured out how to explain his feelings to Papa. Cecile hurried to her brother's side, being careful to hold her skirt away from his paints and brushes. She peered up at the painting. Oh, I'm beautiful, she gasped, throwing her arms around his neck. Armand laughed, and for a moment they studied the half-finished painting together. He had completed only Cecile's golden brown face, but already he seemed to have captured her spirit. Her hazel eyes somehow sparkled, and her chin was tilted playfully. I'm sure Papa and Maman will be impressed with the fine painter you are, Cecile began. Maybe Papa will even... Shh! Armand put his fingers to his lips and glanced toward an open window. His head was tipped as if he was listening to something. Cecile was surprised to hear her mother's voice drifting outside from the parlor. She thought Maman had already gone out on her errands. Octavia, chérie, you worry yourself too much, Maman spoke to in her unusual calm tone. But now Cecile was curious too. What was worrying Maman's sister, Tante Octavia? Aurelia, now the newspapers are reporting that it's yellow fever. Tante Tay sounded upset. Cecile and Armand looked at each other. Remember, Maman went on in a soothing voice, we were born here in New Orleans. You know that newcomers are always in greatest danger if yellow fever spreads. But we grew up here. Our family should be safe. Safe, Cecile mouthed a word to her brother without making a sound. I suppose you are right, Tante Tay said slowly, but still how awful it would be if... And her words hung in the silence for a minute. Octavia, if the fever spreads, we'll do everything we can to help, just as we've done before, Maman said briskly. We'll put on aprons and become nurses, cooks, or whatever is needed. Maman and Tante Tay had done such work. Cecile wanted to hear more. She moved closer to the window, but she didn't notice the toy boat that her cousin Renee had left on the path until its pointed mast jabbed her toe. She gave a yelp and hopped on one foot, hoping that she hadn't torn her best silk slippers. Octavia! Now Cecile could barely hear Maman's stern whisper. Quelque un conte. Someone's listening. Let us go out. The women's footsteps sounded moving away. A moment later, the front door clicked open and thumped shut. Cecile could hear no more. She turned to Armand. He was sorting his paintbrushes. Is Tante Tay right? She asked. Is yellow fever in New Orleans again? Armand shrugged. Well, every summer there are a few cases, you know, he said lightly. Cecile looked at him with narrowed eyes. Then why were they whispering? Armand took his time answering. Cece, don't worry. Everything will be fine. Don't treat me as if I'm a baby, she said, stomping her foot. She instantly remembered her toe and plopped down on her chair to rub it. But her pride was hurting too. She'd kept his secret. Well, why didn't he trust her now? She tried to think of a way to convince her brother that troubling news wouldn't frighten her. Really, Armand? I'm not a baby. Cecile sat up straight in her chair and lowered her voice to tell him her most important secret. In fact, not long ago, I helped save a baby. She watched for her brother's reaction, but he was busy preparing to paint. Cecile was determined to make him understand. Listen to me, Armand. Marie Grace, my American friend, found a baby on the doorstep of her father's office. He's a doctor, you know. The baby Philip, well, he has light skin, but the gardeners thought he might have been a slave. And a slave catcher even came to ask Dr. Gardner about the baby. Armand looked up at her sharply, as if she were telling the most fantastic tale. His paintbrush froze in the air, dripping on his trousers. C'est vrai. It's true. Cecile rushed on with her story. I asked Tante Tay for some of Renee's baby clothes, and we dressed Philip in them. Marie Grace took him to Holy Trinity Orphanage because her father said no slave catcher would look for him in an orphanage for white children. So now Philippe is safe, and even if he was born a slave, we'll never tell. She stopped to take a breath. Armand stared at her with his mouth open. Cecile wondered nervously if he would say that what she'd done was wrong. She knew that helping slaves escape was against the law. We thought it was the right thing to do, she whispered. Finally, Armand spoke quietly. You and Marie Grace did a brave thing, Cece. Most people would have been too afraid. He smiled at her. You have a strong heart, Cecile. She was startled that her brother hadn't called her by her playful nickname. That meant he was serious, and she felt a flash of pride. Armand folded his arms and stared at her thoughtfully. And you're right, Cecile. You're old enough to know what's going on. There's been talk around the city that many people are getting sick with yellow fever. And today, the newspapers reported it too. He paused for a moment. I know I said that there are some cases in New Orleans every year, but this summer what? Cecile leaned forward. This summer it may have been worse than that, Armand said. Some years hundreds of people get sick, even thousands. Then it's called an epidemic. And if so many people get yellow fever, Cecile looked straight into her brother's eyes. Armand nodded slowly. Many will die. That's what people are afraid of now. No one knows what may come. But Maman isn't worried, Cecile said. Armand nodded again. Maman isn't worried, he repeated. Now let me get some work done on your beautiful portrait before she comes back. Cecile felt an odd flutter in the bottom of her stomach, but she reminded herself of her mother's calm, steady words. We are safe, she told herself. Taking a deep breath, she tilted her chin and smiled, just as Armand had posed her before. The very next Sunday afternoon, Cecile skipped beside her brother and her little cousin Renee at the park on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain, just outside the city. The cool breeze off the water made the park perfect for a picnic under the trees, and everyone in the Ray household had come to enjoy it. How I did miss all this when I was away in France. Armand swept his hat into the air with one long arm, and a picnic basket he was holding in the other swung dangerously. Did you picnic in Paris? Cecile asked. Yes, but with only a hungry memory of Maman's watermelon pickles and Matilda's tea cakes, he said, lowering the basket carefully, for those precious goodies were inside it. He knelt to check them. Still smiling, Cecile squinted against the sun. Look, Papa has already found a picnic spot, she said, pointing up ahead to where her father and Grandpère were spreading a blanket under a shady tree. Beside them, Maman was busy gesturing to their young housemaid, Ellen, and Tante Tay was helping Matilda, the cook, unpack a basket. Renee scampered off to join the grown-ups. Armand rose and shrugged as he adjusted his hat. There seems to be plenty of good picnic spots left. You're right, Cecile said, looking around. Scattered here and there were other family groups and clusters of friends, and a train had just pulled to a stop to let the passengers spill out. But the popular park did seem quiet for such a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Where is everybody? Cecile wondered out loud. Then her eyes met her brother's. You don't think it's because of yellow fever, do you? Now, Cece, Armand shook his head and spoke in his big brother tone. Don't let your imagination carry you away. Lots of families leave New Orleans for the summer. You know that. Cecile knew that very well. She thought of reminding Armand that she also knew arithmetic very well and that today she could count the number of families sprinkled in the park. Put it out of your mind, Armand told her. We're here for fun. Look who's gotten off the train. Cecile turned to see Monette Brullier waving. She grinned and waved back. Like Cecile, Monette didn't have sisters, so they always enjoyed each other's company. Cecile ran to join her friend. Monette, bonjour. Bonjour, Cecile. I'm so glad to see you. Monette smiled brightly, and the two girls began to stroll arm in arm. Armand swerved around them, hurrying to deliver the picnic basket so that he could join the noisy clump of Brullier brothers. I haven't seen your brother since he came back from Paris, Monette said. He is très gentil, very nice. Cecile made a face, and Monette laughed. But he's so handsome, not skinny like my brothers. Shh, don't tell him that, Cecile joked. Suddenly, the boys let out a loud cheer and ran together toward an open area between the trees. Look, what are they doing? Oh, they're starting a rackets game, Monette said, tucking her black braid underneath her bonnet. Armand says he played almost the same game in France. They call it lacrosse. Cecile told her, let's watch. The girls wandered toward the open space where the boys had already grabbed long sticks and had begun to chase a small leather ball. They bumped shoulders roughly as each boy tried to scoop the ball into the basket-like end of the stick, hoping to toss the ball toward the goal, a small square of canvas hanging from a large, lonely tree. Shouts went up from the adults who had gathered to watch them. Merveilleux, Armand just scored, Cecile said, clapping her hands. Who is that boy who tried to knock him down? Is that Agnes Metoyer's brother? Monette shook her head and turned away from the noisy onlookers. Didn't you hear? She asked. Agnes and Fanny's family left town yesterday. They're going to their uncle's plantation upriver. Cecile shrugged. They usually go away when it gets too hot, don't they? Monette leaned closer. The Valians are gone too, and so are the Christophs and the Manuels, and those families never go away. My papa says most of his American customers have left too. She paused and looked at Cecile with worried eyes. They're all leaving because they're afraid of yellow fever. Cecile's heart thumped. Monet, do you know more? Les enfants venez manger? Madame Brûleur's voice called out, Children, come eat. I'm sorry, Cecile, that's all I've heard. Monette squeezed Cecile's shoulder and dashed off to eat with her family. Cecile dragged her feet slowly through the grass. She turned back toward the game, but it was breaking up as the Brûleur brothers left to join their family. Cecile looked at the players and the small crowd that had gathered. How many of them would still be around next Sunday? Would her newest friend, Marie Grace, leave New Orleans too? Armand came up beside her, still breathless from the game. What in the world are you frowning about? He teased. Didn't you see me score? Nothing. I mean, yes. Cecile looked up at her brother's laughing face. Everyone was crowding around him now, congratulating him. She wouldn't have spoiled his great day by saying that horrible word, fever. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 1, and next time we'll read chapter 2.